On the afternoon of December 3, 2025, news broke that Ashton Guramatunhu, a 46-year-old man from Middle Park Road in Dudley, had been sentenced to 40 months in prison at Liverpool Crown Court for posing as a registered nurse and defrauding multiple care homes across northern England. From the very first moment this case came to light, it captured attention not simply because of the headline figures, but because it struck at the heart of trust in one of the most sensitive areas of our society, the care of the vulnerable. The scale of his deception, the length of time it went unnoticed, and the real risk posed to patients created a story that professionals, students, and everyday families could not afford to overlook. In the next few minutes, you will hear not just what happened in court on that December day, but also the deeper contours of this case. You will understand how the deception unfolded, what it meant for those involved, and why this story matters. We will move from the most recent developments backward, weaving together the facts of the crime, the investigation, and what little is known about the man at the center of it all. By the time you finish listening or reading, you will be able to hold an intelligent conversation about this case with friends, colleagues, or anyone curious about healthcare integrity, fraud, and accountability. On December 2, 2025, Ashton Guramatunhu appeared at Liverpool Crown Court, having previously entered a guilty plea to one count of fraud by false representation. The judge sentenced him to 40 months in prison, a term that reflects both the seriousness of his fraud and the risk his actions posed to people in care homes who believed they were being looked after by a qualified health professional. During the hearing, the court was reminded that Guramatunhu had used the stolen identity of a real registered nurse to gain legitimate employment through a nursing agency based in Warrington. Over 4 years, from January 1, 2015 to April 5, 2019, he worked in 6 different care homes across the northeast of England, earning an estimated £172,920.94 through his fraudulent activity. Detective Constable Naomi Sargent, who led the investigation, told the court that Guramatunhu should never have been working as a nurse and that his previous convictions meant he was not suitable to be in the care sector. She emphasized that he put the lives of innocent patients at risk purely for his own financial gain, and that she believed he would have continued his deception had he not been arrested. It was a strong sentence and one intended as a warning to others who might consider similar frauds. But to understand how this moment came about, we need to step back nearly a decade and look at how Guramatunhu's fraud began. In late 2014, Guramatunhu walked into a Warrington-based nursing agency and registered himself as if he were a real registered nurse. To do this, he used the identity of an actual healthcare professional, whose name and credentials he stole. With those false documents, he passed the agency's checks and was accepted into its workforce. This step was the linchpin of his scheme. Without legitimate qualifications and without the appropriate professional registration, he would never have been able to secure placements in care homes. But by adopting another person's identity, he gained access to a chain of employment opportunities that should have been closed to him. In doing so, he took advantage of weaknesses in verification systems that, at that time, were meant to protect vulnerable patients and ensure that only qualified people were entrusted with their care. From the beginning of 2015, Guramatunhu worked at 6 different care homes across the northeast of England. These included residential facilities where elderly and vulnerable adults depended on trained staff for basic needs, medication administration, and sometimes complex healthcare interventions. What is remarkable about this period is that for most of it, there were no obvious concerns raised about his work. In some homes, colleagues reportedly praised his competence and nursing skills. One care home noted that there were no concerns about the work undertaken under his watch. This detail adds a layer of complexity to the story. On the surface, it might seem that he was doing his job effectively. But having the ability to carry out certain tasks and being legally and morally qualified to do them are two very different things. A person working with vulnerable adults in a healthcare setting should not be there simply because they can carry out tasks. They must be properly vetted, qualified, and accountable. The practical responsibilities he took on included administering medication, giving injections, and participating in clinical duties where judgment and training are essential. In some shifts, he was the only nurse on duty, a fact that illustrates how deeply integrated he became in the daily care routines of these homes. Yet for all this time, the fraud went unnoticed by employers and regulators. The scheme began to fall apart in January 2019, not because of suspicion from any of the 6 care homes where he worked, but because of a separate complaint. A nursing home reported an incident involving restraint, and the case was referred to the Nursing and Midwifery Council, the NMC, the professional regulator responsible for overseeing nurses in the UK. As part of routine procedures, the NMC contacted the registered nurse whose identity had been stolen, believing he was involved in the incident. The real nurse was puzzled. He had never worked at that care home, never been involved in any such incident, and had no idea why he was being contacted. This red flag prompted him to report that his identity had been used without his consent. That report triggered investigations by Cleveland police. By 2020, it became clear that the nurse's identity had been stolen and used to register Guramatunhu with the Warrington Agency. The case was passed to Cheshire Police, who took the lead in the criminal investigation. In April 2019, shortly after the identity theft was uncovered, Guramatunhu left the UK. He traveled to Zambia, telling Border Force agents upon his return in February 2020 that he had lost his travel documents. His attempt to re-enter the UK, however, led to his arrest when police established he was wanted in connection with the identity fraud. Once in custody, the investigation gathered more evidence about his years posing as a nurse. The prosecution was able to show a clear pattern of fraud by false representation, centered on his use of stolen credentials to gain employment and wages. One of the striking details that emerged during the court process was that Guramatunhu had previous convictions, including offenses like perverting the course of justice and multiple driving-related matters, which would have disqualified him from working in the care sector even if he had been honest about his identity. This piece of the puzzle is important. It shows that this was not a case of someone who had simply slipped through the cracks with minor indiscretions. His criminal history should have precluded him from having any role in regulated healthcare. His decision to conceal that information and adopt a false identity was calculated, not accidental. Over the course of 4 years, Guramatunhu's fraudulent employment generated nearly £173,000 in earnings and agency fees, of which he personally received a substantial portion. But the financial figures, while significant, are only part of the story. For those living in the care homes where he worked, the risk was far greater than a financial loss. When care providers employ someone without the appropriate qualifications, training, and accountability, the potential for harm to residents is real. Detective Constable Sargent made this point clear. Although there were no specific reports of incidents directly attributed to him, the possibility that substandard care could have occurred at any time was unacceptable. In her words, he put the lives of innocent patients at risk purely for personal gain. Here, it is worth noting that I am using the term unalive, where the more common words used might otherwise focus on fatal outcomes. The emphasis here is on life and well-being. Patients' health and dignity were potentially jeopardized by this deception, even if there were no known tragic outcomes directly traced to his actions. It is also important to acknowledge the strain this case placed on the real nurse whose identity was stolen. Beyond the legal and financial implications, he had to spend time and resources restoring his professional reputation and addressing the confusion caused by the false association with incidents at care homes he never worked in. For the families of those in care homes, learning that someone entrusted with their loved one's care was not who he claimed to be would understandably cause anxiety. Even if no harm was proven to have been done, the violation of trust itself is a burden on families who already bear the emotional weight of caring for vulnerable relatives. This case resonates far beyond Dudley, Warrington, or Liverpool. It highlights systemic weaknesses in the way agencies and care providers verify credentials and monitor staff. It raises questions about how easily someone with a criminal past could enter a regulated profession simply by adopting another person's identity. There are safeguards in place, such as the Nursing and Midwifery Council Register, professional checks, and agency vetting procedures. Yet, as this case shows, those safeguards can be circumvented, with potential consequences for patient care and safety. For professionals working in healthcare, this case is a reminder of the importance of vigilance. Identity verification is not just a bureaucratic step, it is a critical layer of protection for patients and for the integrity of the profession. For students and aspiring healthcare workers, it underscores the value of earning qualifications honestly and respecting the trust placed in you by patients and colleagues. For families and stay-at-home parents, it illustrates why regulations exist and why it matters that care providers, whether public or private, adhere to rigorous standards. Knowing that such a deception could go on for years encourages all of us to ask questions, stay informed, and engage with systems of accountability when something seems out of place. Ultimately, the story of Ashton Guramatunhu is about more than fraud. It is about trust, responsibility, and the systems we rely on to protect the most vulnerable in our communities. It is about how a single person's decision to deceive for personal gain can ripple outward, affecting individuals, institutions, and public confidence. As we reflect on what happened in Liverpool Crown Court on December 2, 2025, we can see how this case fits into larger conversations about healthcare standards, criminal justice, and societal expectations. We can appreciate the diligent work of investigators who brought this case to light, and we can use this understanding to contribute to informed discussions about how to prevent similar cases in the future. This narrative leaves you equipped not just with the facts of the case, but with context and insight that can inform your conversations, whether you are discussing healthcare policy, professional ethics, or the importance of protecting vulnerable people within our communities. If there is one key takeaway, it is this: systems matter, oversight matters, and integrity in healthcare is non-negotiable. The sentence handed down in Liverpool was designed to reflect that truth and to remind us all why upholding standards in care delivery is essential to public trust. Thank you for watching. What do you think about this case? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the notification bell so you never miss an update.